Hello, and welcome to this second lesson. And in this lesson, we're going to focus on how do we actually bring data into PowerQuery. So in the first lesson, we primarily focus on how do we access PowerQuery, and I gave a little bit of hint of ways you can import data. But in reality, in most cases, you're not going to be working with data that is inside of your current file. As a matter of fact, you should avoid that as much as possible, because the whole point of using a tool like PowerQuery is to have a separation between the source data and what you're working with. Also, in many situations, you're automating a process that requires multiple participants to update data, to do different things. And if you have to go into the original file where the data resides, well, that kind of defeats a little bit of the purpose. In this lesson, what we are going to do is to look at the most frequent ways how we access data with PowerQuery in most business scenarios. One of those will be just accessing a file directly. Another one would be accessing that file through a folder. And then the third one would be just connecting directly to a database. So without further ado, we have Excel open. And in order to make this process easier, one of the things that I've done is I created a GitHub site where I will be posting the files that I use, as well as kind of a README file that gives you a little bit of a preamble to each lesson. So in our case, let me show you really quick what that looks like. Here's the site, and I will post this in the video so you have access to it. But from here, right now, we have lesson 1, which we already went through. So now back to the lesson. So one of the things that we will do, as I mentioned before, is we're going to start with importing first through Excel, which is or importing a Excel document, which is the most frequent thing that you will face. And we will see different ways of how we do that. We will also do folders, and then we will also go and do a database. So what I'll do, just to keep myself honest, is I'll go back and read through each of the portions here that I included, and you can just follow along. So the first thing that we want to cover is, as I mentioned in the past, when you connect to PowerQuery, everything is read-only. So you are not really altering the destination source. Everything is just, edit. You're not altering the destination. All you're doing is working with a read-only copy of that information and then altering the information that you receive. So with that being said, one of the things that we will cover first is when we are connecting to a data source, generally that connection is always going to be in this format. It's going to be C, the user, your username in your computer that you're using, and then, whatever the folder is. So let's go through that really quick and see what that looks like. So I'll go to data, get data, and I want to get data from file. So I'm going to go through this option, and here my file is here in Ethereum Academy. I'll click on this, and from here we're going to bring in, let's say, sales gen CSV. Actually, let's do an Excel one so you see what Excel looks like. So customer list. So let's do that one. We're going to import. And then when we are going to do the import, it's going to show a preview of what we're importing. So this is the file name, and then this is the worksheet inside of that file. So I have the option to just load. And if I press, now I do. If I press load, it's literally just going to load this as is into my Excel workbook. I don't want to do that. I just want to press transform. And when we do that, it will open the workbook in PowerQuery. Now I can see, if I expand here, I see that there were several steps that were done. So the first step was it connected to the data that I navigated to. The second step is it recognized when we clicked on that worksheet, it recognized the worksheet, the type. And then the last step was it automatically changed the type. This is something you have to be careful, because a lot of time, similar to what I mentioned before, the data type that it changes to may not be the actual data type that you want in your data. In this case, if you notice, every single data type was text, but part of that is because the name of the columns were imported as a record inside of the table. And that happens when you connect to a worksheet. So remember here, it says, kind sheet. If you import where it is a table instead of sheet, it will recognize the header automatically and put the headers on top. So that's something to keep in mind when you're importing tables versus ranges or the worksheet itself. Now, you may say, well, before you mentioned that it was safer to import ranges. And that is true as long as we are importing from the same worksheet, the same workbook. Remember, in the prior lesson, we were not able to just import the worksheet itself. That's something that you don't have available when you are importing from the current workbook. From the current workbook, you can only import ranges or tables. Now, another option that opens up to us when we are importing from a separate workbook is that we actually can do the worksheet. And what that does is it reads the target location or worksheet, and then it pulls the information from there into the destination. So it's almost like the range, the name range, but now the name range is the whole worksheet that you're working with. So in this case, one of the things that we want to do is we want to actually delete this step, because before we do that, we first want to make sure that the headers are promoted into the header name where they belong. So for that, we just do use first row as header. So in order to do that, we just go into this corner symbol here that looks like a table. You click on that, and then you set use first row as headers. So now you see that the first row has become a header, and then it automatically goes and reread and tries to change the types. Now, in this case, everything is text data type is alphanumeric. So it did it right. So, but in many cases, you may want to make sure that you actually convert this to the right. If you read it the wrong way, that you convert it to the right data type. And for that, you can just right click on the column that you want to convert. Just choose change data type and change it to the type that you want. Another option is just to click on this ABC. It will have different symbols here depending on the data type. So let's say this is going to create an error, but let's say that I say that this data type is actually whole number. It's asking me, do you want to replace the current data type or do you want to add a new step? This is something that I started to talk about in the last lesson, but I didn't cover all the way, and I'm sorry for that. But basically, when you say replace step, it's actually going to alter this step here. So customer ID is going to change this customer ID to what I'm saying here. If I say add new step, it's going to add a second change type that is going to do what I'm asking it to do here. Let's do one, you can see it, and then let's do the other. So let's start with the add new step because we can delete that one pretty easy. So if I do that, the first step, it changed the data type to what it originally was. Nothing happened there. But then on my second step, then it took that data type and changed it to something else. So in my case, I knew that this was going to cause an error because obviously the values that we have there are not numeric, they are text. And that's fine. I just wanted to show you what would happen. Now, when you think about the lesson before, and I'm just kind of going to go back there and touch back on that, where we were mentioning you may have, let's say, a customer ID that is, a lot of them are numeric, but then there's one in, let's say, row 10,000 that is not numeric. Let's say it has text in it. Well, that's going to cause an error. And when you are loading your data, that error is going to pop up. If you do this kind of steps, the first step is going to happen first. So it's going to convert everything to number, let's say, and then it's going to convert things to text. So let's say if we did this the other way around, you will see what I mean. So this change type, you try to convert this to numbers. That's an error. Then if I go back and say, okay, let me convert it to text, and then I'm saying customer type now is text, it is still an error. It says it's text, but before it could get to that step of converting it to the right data type, it already tried to convert it to the wrong data type. So in order for us to do this right, we actually have to convert the number at the right place without causing any error. So if I delete this step, you can see here now that we have the error goes away. Now, let me go back and do the convert in place, which is what I said the other option is. So I'm going to go and do the same thing, replace current. And now you see that in this, no step was added. In this step, it changed it to integer. T64, that is what PowerQuery does for integer. So in this case, I have the error. And if that exists, let's say that that is the column that you have an issue with, you want to go back to the same step and change it to what you need it to be. So I'm just going to go back to text. It's going to ask me again, do you want to replace or you want to add? I want to replace because obviously the current step is causing a problem. So I'm just going to replace that. So I just wanted to cover that from the prior lesson because I didn't cover that in depth. I kind of got sidetracked into something else. But hopefully this is clear enough. If you want to kind of know the whole context, go back to that lesson and see the initial part of that. Now, so this is the first option that we have as we are importing data. But there's some issues with this. And this is the first problem that most people will face when they are importing data and they are new to PowerQuery is that, they will do all their transformation. Everything is working fine. I'm ready to load. And as soon as I share this with somebody, it breaks. It's not working. So why? Well, let's go back to the source. And when you look at the source here, it's specifically on my computer. So nobody else is going to have this same, very unlikely, especially in this organization, no one is going to have the same user path. So when you are importing from this perspective, you're basically hard coding the destination of where the file is. So you have to be careful that whenever you are importing data, you are doing so from a dynamic or a generic, let's say, address. So in order to do that, something simple that we need to do, I will close this again and discard, and then I'll go back to try to import the same data. But before I do so, I will go and open that file and get the exact address from that file. And I'll show you in a minute. So this is the file, customer list. And from here, if we go to file and we go to info and you go to copy path, we want that path. So now that I have that, I'm going to close the file. Then I'm going to try again, file, Excel workbook. And let's see what this does. So you see where it says list XLSX web. So we want to delete everything there. And then let's try to open this and see what happens. Okay. It's going to ask me to connect because this is behind an organizational account. I want to say organizational. I want to sign in. And let's try to connect. Same thing. So now we have again that same list, transform. And from here, everything is pretty much the same. We haven't changed much here at all. The only thing that we changed is where we're sourcing the file. Now, if you think on your organization, if you sync your SharePoint site to your computer, which is something that I highly recommend because then you have your SharePoint site available as if it's part of your C drive. It actually is part of your C drive at that point, D drive, wherever you're saving it. But the point is, when you save it to your computer and you navigate to your computer to get the information, it's always going to use the local path, which is the C drive or D drive path. When you go and get the global path or the one that is external to your computer, then anybody else that also has access to that data will be able to run this PowerQuery process just the same as you would. All they would need to do is just validate their credentials, just like I did, and then you're good to go. So that's kind of the first lesson that I wanted to teach. But let's say that we're not just downloading this Excel file. Let's say that we actually want to download or we want to import multiple files. That's where this process kind of breaks down a little bit, because if I wanted to bring another file, what I would have to do is go back and do the same process and import the next one. So as we look into the options that I have here, I have customer, I have products, and those are distinct files. So it would make sense, let's say, if we want to bring those in separately. But let's look into a situation where, like say in sales, and we have, all of these files. It would be very inefficient for us to bring each of this manually one by one. Not only that, but it kind of defeats the purpose of working with the files separately together, because the whole point is for us to combine this information. So as new files come in, the information just shows up. I promise you that PowerQuery is all about automation. You refresh and things just work. So in this case, what would we do? Well, this is where we change our mentality from a file to a folder. And we will do the same thing. We will go back. We kind of explore let's keep this. Now that we explore how we go and get the data from a SharePoint site from a SharePoint location. We will do the same thing for this, but instead of going obviously to the CSV, because if we open that CSV, all we will get is the address for that specific file. So let's go through that really quick and I'll show you, and then we'll change to the proper way. So I don't want to convert. I want to leave it as is. And then I'm going to go to File, Info again. And if I copy this path, then I try to import again. This is CSV. So let's just go through the process of what it would be to do one CSV file. So I'm going to go back to data, get data from file, from text CSV, and I will paste the same information as we did before. That's the local one. I did the wrong one. I'm sorry. Interesting, for CSV, it's only showing me the option for that. But let's just go and do this CSV to just go through the process, and I'll show you what it looks like when you're importing a CSV file versus an Excel file. So let's import that. Again, you still see in CSV, you don't see the hierarchy that we saw first, where you had the folder and then the worksheet name, because in a CSV file, you only have one worksheet. It doesn't have multiple objects inside of the file. It's just that one file. So you don't see that option. You just see a preview of the file. And then some of the options of how is this file delimited. So, this is kind of part of the information that it shows there. Then we do transform. And if you see in this file, when we import it, some of the things that it did is it connected to the source, it promoted the headers, and then it gave us the change type right away. Unlike with the Excel worksheet, where the header promotion didn't happen automatically, in CSV, it does that because it understands that it's, the first row is always header. That may not be the case all the time. So, let's say that you have a file that the first few rows are empty or have a different type of title or something like that. You need to adjust that. But for the most part, it will be, especially when it's, data export from source, it will be something that generally the first row is always going to be the one with the headers. Or you can specify if it is not headers, and that way it just imports everything as data, and then the first row just as columns. Now, if I wanted to go through and change the source to be the same as with the Excel file, one of the things that I could do is just go to this one, go to source. I could copy all the way to, I believe it's here, global traders. I could copy that, go here, go to source, and I could just change it here all the way here, paste it there. And a thing to notice is that I need to change the slashes from backslash to forward slash. Let's see if that works. And here's to nothing. So as you can see, it just works. One of the things I had to do was click on edit so you can kind of reread the file. But now the file is based on that URL, which then is accessible by everyone. But again, what if I wanted to upload not just that one file, but multiple files? What do we do in that case? So in that situation, that's when we come with two folders. And for that, we can just stay here. We're going to go to new query from database, from other sources. And what we're going to select is from SharePoint folder. And then here we need to input that URL that we need. Now, we're going to go to actual SharePoint because this causes some confusion a lot of times. So when you're in your folder, you may feel that you can just copy this and paste it there, and that this should work. This is my folder. That's what I need. Do that. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's sign in and let's connect. Okay. We get an error, and this error is not very descriptive of what's wrong. I'll tell you what's wrong with this is most of the time when we're copying this, we're copying the address of the actual folder. Also, if we do copy link from here, it's going to copy the same thing. It's the address to the actual folder. But when you're importing from SharePoint, it needs the site name, and the site, as you see, is still going to the folder itself, and it's some cryptic address. We don't need that. So what we need to do is on your site name up here, you want to click on this icon, this button. That will take you to the actual site. From here, just copy this and let's go back to PowerQuery and let's try again. So I'm going to go to File from SharePoint folder, and this is what I want to copy. That worked just fine. Something that you should notice here is, unlike with Excel, where you just gave us the list of tables, this is giving me us the list of all of the documents that exist inside of that SharePoint site. So if you have a site that is really large with a lot of documents, this can really slow down the process when you're reading the information. So one of the first things that you want to do is, filter to the data that you want, or at least the folder that you want. I'll show you that in a second. But before we go there, you see that you also have this combine and transform option, and you have the transform data. If you're connecting to a site that all it has is the information that you're or the files that you're looking for, and they all align perfectly, Combine and Transform is a great option, because what that does is it opens up the UI, you make whatever changes you want to make, and then all of those changes get applied to each file separately. I find that, at least for me, I don't like to use Combine and Transform, because while it is kind of an easy path to combining a lot of files, very few circumstances do I have a situation where that is the case and all my data is perfectly aligned. So I always go with transform data. And one of the reasons I do this is because I have a lot more flexibility into pre-filtering, into changing and doing things that I need to do in order to combine my files. So in this case, the files that we need, so this folder path is what's telling you what how you can filter. So this is the destination of the folder where your data exists. A lot of this are irrelevant to what we're trying to do. What I can do is my filter was for sales 2023. So in that case, I could maybe filter on sales 2023 so those are two different folders. So what I'll do here is I'll go to text filters, and then we'll go to ends with, and we will say the separation is / yes, ends with sales / 2023. And I believe it's all lowercase. Click OK. Okay, that didn't work. Let's see. Sales is capital S. So another lesson. PowerQuery is case sensitive. So although I typed the right word, the S is capitalized in one, and I did not capitalize it in mine. So for some reason that is not working. So why it isn't working? Well, let's see. Okay, so I was not using the last /, which contains is another thing that you can use, but I find that using that telling PowerQuery where to find the text that it's going to look for is a lot faster than telling it to look anywhere in the text. Also, if you are in an organization where a lot of people are doing different things, I can't guarantee that the only place that sales 2023 exists is in the file that I'm using. Somebody else could have another document structure that is using the same exact thing from a different place. So for us, because we know that this is how our data ends with, this is what I want. This is global, let's say, traders raw sales 2023. So I'm going to take that, and that's going to be how I'm going to filter my data, just to make sure that I have an end with that should be as unique as possible. So I apply that filter here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to delete that filter. Then I'm going to go to the one that I tried before. And here, I'm just going to paste that information. And let's see what happens. So now I have all of my data. Now from here, this is going to be a very, very quick kind of a exploration on how you change files from binary to what you want. So remember I said that I have a lot more flexibility when I do the folders myself. Well, I could have some of these folders that are CSV, but then others are Excel. How you convert those from binary, because binary is just the generic file structure that you're receiving, but then PowerQuery needs to understand, okay, with that binary file, what is it, so I can do the conversion into the proper file format. Think about the extension, the .xlsx or the .csv or the .txt, whatever that is. So it needs to understand what that is. Now, one of the good things is that the source is providing us the extension type of the file. So we can use that to help us determine how to do that. And also we have it here, but we have to make sure that the files that we're using have the right conversion. So we want to filter by file type in order to make that conversion. And this is what I mean when I say make that conversion. So one thing we'll do, we'll go to add custom column. And in this custom column, I'm going to say converted document. So that's going to be the name of our folder, the name of our step or the column that we're creating. And there, what I'm going to do is say CSV. I'm going to start typing. I said document, open parenthesis, and then I'm just going to double click on content. And then I'm going to click OK. And all I did there is tell PowerQuery, hey, that content source has these binary files. Those files are actually CSV files. Can you please convert them into CSV? And now you can see that these are actual CSV files. In the prior here, these are just binary files that we can't do anything with. So now that we have these CSV files, another benefit of importing the folder is that we can convert this folder, or we can manipulate these files all at the same time while they are in this column. If we imported each file separately, any change that we make in one file, we have to make it in another one. This is a little bit counterintuitive to work with when you have folders like this the first time, but as you get comfortable with it, or as you continue to watch more episodes, I'll show you how you could do a lot of different transformations while your folders, your data is still in a list like this. So for our case, we looked at some of the files, and one of the things that we noticed is that these files are all the column headers are still part of the data. So we need to promote that column header, because if we don't do that right now, when we try to export, and let's do this, I'm going to just uncheck that, and I'm just going to combine all of these files in one file. So one of the things that you see here is now the files have what should be the column header is now part of the data. We could use first row as header as we did before, but then that's creating problems. So we can't really do that. So what else can we do? So if we go back, the other problem is, even if we could convert it from that perspective, the other problem is that there are other places where that exists. And you know what? Let me just go back to the top and filter on that. So every time, see text filters equals. So you see every file that we imported has that first row that is headers inside of their data. So we need to promote that on every one of those files in order for the files to combine properly. The other thing is that when you have this column 1, column 2, column 3 as the header type, is going to combine the data basically by the index number or by the column number. So let's say that in one of the files, somebody changed transaction ID is the 3rd column and customer ID is the 5th column, or in the other files, they are all aligned. Well, if it's column 1, column 2, column 3, it's just going to combine whatever is in those columns. It's not going to take in consideration the name of the actual header. So this doesn't work. We need to go back and undo this and undo this. So what we need to do is the same thing that we did before, the promote headers. So we're going to create another step, which is go to custom columns again, and we're going to call this one promote headers. And one of the things that I hope that you can, you're noticing here is we're creating transformation, or we're creating column functions that are applying steps into tables. So PowerQuery has the ability to transform data, not only from a table perspective, but also it can transform columns. It can make transformation into individual items. So when we are doing this custom column, it's not just to add a column to a table. A lot of time, the table that we're working with is a table of tables, and you can make transformations into those tables, which is what we're going to do here, which is what we did with the content when we converted the content into actual CSV. But in this step, we're going to take that converted document, and we're going to do an additional transformation to that and create another column with that. This is good, especially when you are starting, because then you can see each step, and then that becomes part of your documentation. So here we're going to say table promote, and there's promote headers, open parenthesis, and then I'm going to take the converted document, and then I'm going to click OK. And then if we look at this now, you see that the headers are promoted into each of those, for each of those items. So that's what we want. Now that we have this, and one of the things you could see the prior step, this is what it was, this is what is in the current step. So that's what I'm saying, that you can see exactly what you're doing. So you can become comfortable with the UI. But now that we have what we want, this is all that we want to promote. I can just right click here, remove other columns. It's the same thing that we could do from home and do choose columns. And then I just want from here, the promote headers, but it's a lot easier. Just right click, remove all the columns, does the same thing. So now that I have this one, I can just expand this. I don't want to use original in the name because then that will just add, let me just show you what that would do. If I do that, it's going to add the original column name, which was promote headers dot, and then the column name that existed in the table. We don't want that. We actually want to uncheck that and then just use the original names. So now that we have a proper name for the columns, PowerQuery will use the actual name of the columns in order to combine them. So it doesn't matter if one of the columns had transaction ID at the beginning or at the end, it will always use the proper information from that. For instance, if you see in one of the files, and we could go and change the order of one of those, it would just do that. It would do the same thing, and we'll actually do that in the final part just so you can see that. Now that we have this is pretty much, kind of how importing data. The second option, well, this is the third one because we did Excel, we did CSV, now we're doing folders. And the way we did this with SharePoint, I just went right into the most difficult part, which is figuring it out with SharePoint, but it would be the same thing that you do if you were importing this data from your local drive. So in that case, instead of choosing SharePoint folder, I would have just chosen folder. And then I would have just navigate to where I want and open. Then you see it is the same process that we did before. Now, in this one, because we had the folder with the structure that we want, let's try to go and do the combine and transform, which is the part that I said I never used, but it would be important for you to see that option. So it's showing up, we're selecting here what kind of data we have. One of the things we could do is just skip files with errors. I wouldn't do that because then that could hide problems that you have in your data. So I don't want to do that. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, see what this creates. This creates this kind of a structure where you have the helper queries. And what these queries do is any transformation that you make in the file is going to apply it across the board into the files in here. So it's parameterizing all of your actions and then including those actions into these helpers. You would feel, especially as you get more comfortable, that you may want to make additional changes. The moment that you touch this area here, it breaks the functionality of the combine transform that the UI does. So I honestly do not like to use this. In years that I've done this, I probably used that option a few times, not more than 2 or 3 times. And I always go back to just doing it manually. It doesn't take that much time and it just makes life a lot easier. So I'm just going to take this, going to delete it. The reason why it was showing me that error when I was trying to delete here. So delete query sample cannot be deleted because it's being referenced by transform sample file. So PowerQuery will not allow you to delete a source of a subsequent step or a subsequent query. Basically, it's not going to allow you to delete a query that is being referenced by something else. So that is in PowerQuery. If you go to data flows, it actually will delete the query and any reference to it. So you have to be careful when you're doing that and in which interface you're working. So for us, I just need to select both items that I want to delete, or first delete the reference or the item that is referencing it, and then I can delete here. So now that that's done, then we're good to go. Then the last part that we need to cover is how do we actually explore SQL tables, or SQL databases. For that, we're not going to work with an actual SQL database, but we're going to work with something close enough that is going to give us a feel of what a SQL would be like. And for that, we're going to use the Northwind OData source. And to connect to it, we'll just go to new. We're just going to go back to new source from other sources, OData feed, paste the information there, click OK, anonymous. We don't have any credentials going to that. Then this gives us a really good perspective of what a SQL connecting to a SQL database would be. So if you were connected to SQL, this would be kind of your database or your schema, depending on how it's structured. And then this would be the list of tables inside of that database or schema. I also included this same data source in the documentation for this lesson, so you can go and start playing with this. But from here, you can, just as we did before, you can go through and look at the different options that you have here. One of the things that you could do, which I didn't mention before, is you could select multiple items. And let's say I want to see customer, employees, customer demographic, and I want to import those items. I can easily just select those, then click OK, and then all of those items get imported one by one. So that's just another option for you to import data. And one of the things that you notice with a database type of connection is that the data just comes in right away with the header information. It doesn't require you to promote headers or do that. So as much as possible, just make sure that you are using databases whenever it's possible. Obviously, that's not the situation that's not possible in every situation. But whenever you have that kind of source, there's just so many more benefits. One, your data is better structured. There's more rigor about how the data is built and the changes that happen to the data. So it's more stable. But also, as you're interacting with that data, it's a lot easier for you to interact with it because it just comes in a format and let's say in a language that PowerQuery understands really well. Another part of it, which I don't know if we can see it here, but let me try just to filter here into a few items. So another benefit that you get from here is view native queries. That obviously, because we're not connecting to an actual database, you don't get that. But whenever you see this on your data connecting to a SQL database, if this is enabled, you will always see the query that is being sent back to SQL. Whenever you can see that query, it means that you're query folding, something that we're going to cover in future lessons. But just know that that query folding is a lifesaver because you could work with massive data outside of Excel. And then it's just sending to Excel the result of your data, or Excel, PowerQuery, wherever it works. This is a functionality that works across all of PowerQuery. And whenever you have that option, you want to make sure that you utilize that as much as possible. And there are some functionalities or some functions or in PowerQuery that will break that query. So you want to make sure that you don't do those until you absolutely have to. But anyways, that's kind of giving you some of the benefits of connecting to a database like this, and how you can continue to build your skills and just ease your process by connecting a lot of time to the direct data source, not just to something that somebody has built after the fact. So with that being said, I hope that this was helpful, that this gave you a good perspective of what PowerQuery actually can do as far as importing data. So right now, we just pretty much cover the extract of the ETL, extract, transform, and load. We just cover the E. And over the subsequent lessons, we're going to go deep into the transformations. That's the part where you spend most of your time, honestly. And also in how do we organize a lot of our environment to lead us into that extract, transform, and load process in a kind of a seamless manner. So next lesson, please tune in and let's continue with more transformations. Now that we have data here, in the next lesson, we'll just jump into bringing more data and then start combining that data, cleaning that data, and see how we actually work with information in a way that actually will show results and benefits in the automation that I've been promising you that PowerQuery can do. This is kind of giving you some of the idea of what is possible, but we will get into more of that. One thing before I go, and I'm very sorry, the one thing that I said I would cover was, now that we have, let me delete these items. So the beauty with having a folder is, let me load and transform this. So it's our folder. This is what we need. We can delete this and we can delete this. Let's name this cells 2023. And let's close and load. So we have 4,359 records that loaded, and we didn't make any changes. We just combined the data. But let's see, next month you have another file. Let's imagine that, there's in that cells 2023, another month was added. So I'm just going to take one of these ones and add it. So it's just showing you what we actually would do when we are adding additional month. And this is something that is very, very common. So now that we do that, let's go back to Excel. Let's minimize this. Let's just do a refresh here and see what happens. 4329. So as you can see, if we go back to the filters, we refresh here, you see that that data came in. We had to do nothing. The only reason I came and refresh here was to show you the result, but that's really the beauty of PowerQuery. Just once you set it up the right way, it will follow those steps and take in consideration those variables that you set up in order to account for new data. We'll go deeper into this in subsequent lessons, but I just wanted to kind of show you, the last part of the lesson that we cover here. So with that being said, I hope that, this was valuable to you. I hope that you enjoyed the lesson. Give me feedback, what's working, what's not. I know I'm going to tangents, but I hope that those are of value as well. If you like what you are receiving, please like, subscribe, let me know, what's working. Give me that feedback so I can become better at doing this. Have a nice day. God bless you. Goodbye.